Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Welcome back to Resiliency Redefined. Okay, my friends, I know I always say oh, this is a treat, but this is a treat. Today's episode is with Natalie Tysdal. Now, I have been a guest on Natalie's show. I'm a huge fan of her work. She is a woman who was she was a television anchor for many, many years. She was that trusted news voice. And all of a sudden, she reached a moment in her career when she decided, I want to imagine something different. And on our episode today, we get into that. What is it like to be a news anchor in this digital era with all of this noise and negativity? And how do you find your values and know what matters most in the midst of that? And again, how do you take that step into a future that might be different than what you've always done? So I'm so glad to welcome you to this episode with Natalie. Please let me know what you think. There's all of her materials in the show notes, so you can listen to her podcast as well. It is a gem of a podcast. So without further ado, please join me for this episode of Resiliency Redefined with Natalie Tysdal. Natalie, welcome to Resiliency Redefined. We're so excited for this time together. So thank you for being here.
Robyne, it's a pleasure. I'm so excited for your podcast. It's been, I think, 3 years since you first appeared on my podcast. So our friendship has been so rewarding to me in so many ways.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so very much. And again, you are one of my solid in rotations. I feel like I hear you and connect with you each week listening to your podcast. And we'll make sure to
Thank
leave that
you.
information in the show notes for other people to have a chance to join along in the conversations that you lead. And to kind of kick us off to get us started, Natalie, for friends who haven't had a chance to connect with you yet, could you tell us a little bit about the good work that you're doing and some of the areas that you're interested in thinking about and exploring right now?
Well, thank you for asking. Most of my career, actually, all of my career, I've been a journalist. I
Yes.
spent 28 years in television news. And during COVID, when we all reanalyzed our lives, I was broadcasting out of my basement. I did a morning show.
Mhm.
And I realized when they asked me to come back downtown into the studio, I don't want to go back to the studio. I
Yeah.
can do this for myself and I can be an independent journalist and do the stories that I know women want to hear. My primary audience is
Mhm.
women. And I can do that through the podcast platform. I can do it through YouTube. So I took a big leap of faith,
Yes.
and I left that longtime career. So many people said, "You're crazy. You have a dream
Yeah.
job as a television anchor." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm not happy."
Mhm.
And I didn't feel like I was helping people be happy. I felt like the
Mhm.
news that I was doing and that so many TV stations were doing was anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
And so I left and I started what is now the Natalie Tysdal podcast.
Mhm.
And I focus on women's health, a lot of resiliency, a lot of
That's right.
mental health, because that's a big part of who we are as women in being healthy women. So here I am today, 3 years later, and the podcast is going strong. I help other women with media
Mhm.
because that's where my background has been. So with podcasting and media and health issues.
Yeah. Natalie, I absolutely appreciate how you were on this trajectory, right? This successful career. And from the outside looking in, it's like, yeah, she's got it all figured out. This is terrific. And having that awareness to realize, yes, I appreciate what I've had. I've appreciated what this has looked like for these years. And it's okay to want something different. It's okay to
Yeah.
imagine that kind of second career. We call that kind of that second summit, and then you were able to just really lean into your values, the meaning making, that sense of purpose and the work that you're doing to know what audience that you want to be connected with and to be of service to. And it's just such a beautiful example for so many of us when we imagine doing something perhaps a wee bit different for that. So I just want to say, thank you. And to recognize that's scary. That is scary to take that leap of faith.
It is scary, and I tell women all the time that there is a chance. I mean, I was 50 when I did this, and so, I did have a wonderful job, love the people I work with, loved what I did, but I think there's always a way to reimagine it, and there is
Mhm.
always when you have that faith and you have, um, well, just the tenacity to do
Yeah.
it, that there's always a way to do it.
Yeah. And I really just love that idea that I think so many people have this propensity to feel really stuck, right? They just kind of feel stuck
Yeah.
in the patterns and the routines. And again, there's also kind of one side where it's like, who am I to want more, right? And also all these different
Mhm.
kind of pushes and pulls and tensions. And then again, finding the through line in that experience to say, this is what I think will make sense for me at this particular point in my life. And again, not that there's an expiry date on any of our dreams or our adventures. Like, I just think it's really encouraging. And I think it also, again, sets an example for other people that it's okay to reimagine, as you said, or to do that reinvention. And the fact that, if anything, it can actually energize us when we start to think about what future chapters are ahead of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some things I really had to question myself when I
Yeah.
did this. Why am I doing this? And early in my career, I remember creating this framework. I think you'll appreciate in what you do. And the questions that I asked myself in making a big decision, and they're pretty basic, but they
Yeah.
really work in making a big decision, especially a big career change.
Yeah.
And the first one was, am I happy?
Mm,
And, the news isn't always happy. As a matter of fact, 99.9% of it is not happy.
yeah.
And the
Yeah.
stories I wanted to be doing as a health reporter weren't the stories that were getting chosen,
Yes.
especially during that time. It was fires, it was
Yeah.
politics, it was murder, it was these things that I would wake up having bad dreams about or putting my family in those situations. So psychologically, I knew I'm not happy. And if I'm not happy, the viewers certainly aren't happy.
Yeah.
So that was question number one is, am I
Yeah.
happy? And I couldn't answer yes to that question. And then the second question that I asked myself is, am I challenged? And
Oh,
honestly,
interesting.
I wasn't very challenged.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of TV anchors go into autopilot mode. You have a teleprompter, you show
Yep.
up, and I didn't like the feeling that I wasn't challenged by the right things. I
Yes.
was challenged by the information that was coming
Mhm.
in and the psychological part of it, but I
Yeah.
didn't feel challenged in a journalistic way.
Yeah.
Um, and those were the two most important.
Mhm.
So, am I happy? Am I challenged? And then the third question that I often asked myself is this what I want to be doing the rest of my life?
I love that.
And I knew I didn't want that, yet it was so hard to still say, I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Where
Yeah.
am I gonna have a paycheck?
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
my identity,
Yes.
especially as a TV anchor, like, that was it's such a pride-filled thing,
Of
and you have to
course.
have a certain amount of ego to do it, but
Yeah.
I didn't want the ego to be the reason, and I look at a lot of people now who are still in a really difficult business, and I think it is really ego-driven, and I
Yeah.
don't consider myself that type of person. So I asked myself those questions, and they've served me well over the years in making good decisions.
Yeah, I love that framework. Of course, I love a good framework. So yes, that structure and again, that guardrailing, right? In terms of, am I happy? Am I being challenged? Like, is this what I want to be doing with, essentially like with your time, right? I believe that
Mhm.
our time is such a gift and it's such a privilege, especially when we're in a season of health and well-being, because
Yeah.
we have so much flexibility in terms of what we choose to do with our time. And there are seasons when our health is not available to us in the way that we want it to be. And again, a lot of our choices are taken away from us when we're unwell.
Yeah.
And so again, to me, it's such a beautiful place to be able to ask before we're ever in that situation where our options become somewhat limited, to be able to say, like, is this how I want to be showing up? Is this how I choose to be of service? And I
Yes.
absolutely love that. And I could share with you a question I often ask as well to add to your list at complimentary is this idea of how is this impacting my family? And for me, that has been
Mm,
a guidepost because there's been times where, maybe I have been challenged, like maybe I am happy, but the cost that it's costing me to my family like
yeah.
isn't worth it anymore. And actually just the producer you met at the outset of this, Ashley, we were just chatting. There was a season where, I was at the university, I had a great career, I loved it, and I missed like a decade of my kids' childhood. I
Mm.
missed the cross
Mm.
country races, I missed the fall festivals, I missed anything that happened during, quote, "school hours."
Mhm.
Those were also work hours for me, and getting to that point where you recognize it's like, this is costing me too much.
I'll add to that too because I justified it, and I think we tend to do that. We come up with a framework of justification for why we do what we do, and I justified it because my alarm clock went off at 2:30 in the morning. So I got to it, and it was. But here's how I justified it. Oh, I can handle it because I come home and I get to be a mom and I get to have a full time job. This is great. So I would go in at 2:30. I would get up at 2:30. The show started at 4:30 and I was on until 9:30, and then I would do my work after, and I'd come home around 11, sometimes noon. Like, I've got the full day. I get to be a
Mm,
mom, I get to volunteer. I was the
yeah,
president of the PTA at the school. I did all of these things, but guess what suffered?
yeah,
My own health.
of
But I
course.
justified it. Like, this is
Yeah,
I get to have everything. This is perfect.
yeah,
But, come 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, I was exhausted, but
yeah,
that's usually when the basketball game was or
that's
the
right.
PTA meeting would be. And so then I would stay up until 9, 10 when normal people stay up,
Yeah,
but I would get 4 hours sleep.
yeah,
And I thought I could do it, and for a while, I did a morning show for 17 years. I did evening shows before that, but the
yeah,
evening show didn't work because then I never saw the kids.
yeah,
So and I have 3 children.
mhm,
So I justified it, and I think a lot of us do that in our lives where we
mhm,
think, "I can do this," or
yeah,
"There's a reason I'm doing this, and it's more important." So to be so honest with yourself because your health, that's the number one thing for me in
yeah,
being resilient is your health. And I'm still paying that price. I'm
yeah,
54 years old. I did this for 28 years and I'm still rebuilding my health
yeah.
from the time that I did that.
Yeah, and again, when you're sharing that, like, I could see, like, just with such clarity that part of Natalie that was just like, "Hey, I can do this. I am a high achiever. I am a
Mhm.
high performer. I am somebody with a servant heart. Like, I will give and give and give." And from a
Mhm.
physiological perspective, your body's like, "I'm trying to keep up, Natalie. I'm trying to keep up." But again, years and years of that sleep deprivation, and again, as a health
Mhm.
journalist, you know how absolutely crucial our sleep is for our well-being. And again, the
Yeah.
fact that you're, running that deficit for so long, it's like we're coping for sure and you're figuring it out. But as then I just my heart goes out to that part of you and that physical side where it's just it came at such a high cost. It came at such a high cost. And again, I'm so appreciative that you were able to do what you did and that season served you and your family well.
Mhm.
And coming to that kind of that tipping point or that threshold moment where you're like, "And I'm gonna choose to do it differently from here on out."
Yeah, and being honest with ourselves what that really is. I didn't know, Robin.
Yeah.
I didn't know what good felt like
Oh,
because my standard was just feeling bad,
yeah,
feeling tired, that drain when you miss a good night's sleep. That was
yeah,
just my standard for many years. I just thought that's how we felt.
yeah,
So actually getting the time in the months after leaving was like, oh,
yeah,
wow, I have energy or I have
yeah,
clarity. And
yeah,
so that can mean different things to different people.
yeah,
But to analyze your life and where you are, and then think about, am I really as good as I can be or should be? I love what you said about what is this doing to my family? I had kind of a fourth that I would ask. And
yeah.
that fourth question was, am I proud of what I'm doing?
Mm,
Can I really step back and say, "That's great. I'm really proud of that." And
yeah,
that certainly was not the case. That was an easy no.
yeah.
Proud of the way I handled things, but I didn't have a control over many of the stories and the things that were coming out through television news.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Now there's so many different questions and threads that I wish that we could pull in. And the one that I'm really curious about, and again, again, we've kind of touched on that there's this like physical piece about when we're not getting our sleep. We kind of feel almost a wee bit numb, I think, for a while and maybe
Mhm.
even long seasons. And then we start to just think that's normal. And, one of the kind of areas that sometimes I talk about people with is that, normal doesn't mean optimal. And so, like,
Mm,
maybe this is your normal,
mm,
but that doesn't necessarily mean that's optimal, and there's opportunities that we can feel better. And, one of the things that I'm also just thinking about with your sharing is that not only are you in this like sleep deprived state trying to hold it all together, right? You're running your family system. Cause again, running a family is a full time job. You have a full time job. We know that it's coming at a cost of your health and your well being. And then you are bombarded by some of the saddest, worst, heaviest
Mm,
topics and pieces of information. And you're the one who's the conduit of sharing
mhm,
that and then jumping to the next thing. And I'm so
mhm,
curious how, if we think about even just kind of the state of where things are right now with news and different media
mhm.
pieces, would you have any suggestions or ideas or invitations where we can keep ourselves informed, but we don't have to like overexpose ourselves to all of that negativity that seems to be kind of really filling up the airways right now?
Well, first I'll say, I didn't have a choice
Yes.
when I was in that industry. Um, we do have a choice as consumers. So
Right.
my first suggestion would be to turn it off,
Yeah.
just to turn it off.
Mhm.
You can limit yourself or you can create the boundaries that
Mhm.
give you what you need and that you will know what's happening in the world in 5 to 10 minutes a day. It's
Yeah.
easy.
Yep.
You don't need to know the dirty details.
Mhm.
You don't need to know every single update, which is the life I lived.
Yeah.
When I would come home, usually I would have a book to read for interviews the next day.
Yep.
And when I would come in at 3 o'clock and 3:34 in the morning, I'd have 100 emails to catch up on. So
Wow.
I had to keep up through the day. I
Yeah.
couldn't just set it aside like we should do with our work when we come home. Because
Yes.
if I didn't keep up, I'd come in and have no idea what was happening, and then I would be ill-informed, live on TV. So it ruled my life.
Yes.
We don't have to do that as consumers.
Mhm.
So my suggestion would be that just turn it off, and that goes
Yeah.
for social media too. I mean, not
Mhm.
many of us watch television news. It's
Mhm.
interesting. I take a poll often when I speak, and I ask people, "How many people watch the 10 PM news?"
Mhm.
Which in America, the 6 PM, it used to be
Yeah.
the 5, 6, and 10 PM
That's
news.
right.
Those times have gone out the window
Yeah.
because it's 24/7,
Mhm.
and not only can you watch the live stream all the time with instant updates, but we get it on our phones. We get the
That's right.
updates, the notifications. It's either on TikTok or Instagram. And most people will see the headline on social media
Mhm.
before they will see it on the news.
Yeah.
So the industry has really changed.
Mhm.
So my suggestion would be to give yourself limits,
Mhm.
set those limits, and then stick to them. And it's hard because
Yeah.
it is so addictive. And
Yeah.
I know, we live in the social media world when we're even promoting our podcasts.
That's right.
But, to not let it be the first thing, that you pick up before your feet hit the floor, and to
Mhm.
not let it be the last thing that you look at before you close your eyes. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the things that will then ruminate in your brain,
Yes.
which I know these are all things that you talk about. So I would say to set those limits, to give yourself even a timer. I mean,
Yeah.
we need those things. I'm gonna give myself 10 minutes to scroll, and then
Mhm.
I'm gonna get up.
Yeah. I love that, and you're absolutely right that it's like it's so invasive. It's everywhere. We are getting this, like, up to the minute, up to the second type of announcements, and again, you can even it almost feels like wildfire, right? I remember just recently there was a pretty substantive world event, and I was at an event, and, like, within seconds, you could just literally watch the room get the update, and it was
Mm,
just like this, like,
yeah,
wave that went through the room, and again, one of the things that I often talk about, especially when I'm with my own teenagers, is this idea like from an evolutionary perspective, we weren't ever designed to take in this amount of information. Like our brains
yeah,
were not designed for 24-hour newsreels. And if you think for
mm,
what it looked like for thousands and thousands of years, it was word of mouth. It was, weeks, if
yeah,
not months before information would get to someone and you would just get little pieces. And again, there would be, all this everyday life, so to speak. And then you would get, maybe it was the newspaper or was the telegram or was just that neighbor. You'd get a piece of information and you'd kind of process it and go back to the everyday tasks. And now
Yeah,
it's just that in itself being exposed to all of this content is again another
yeah.
full-time job where we're trying to be kind of aware of all of it. And I remember recently talking to a group again about this idea that the a lot of how this information is being presented, it's almost as if it has to be so sensational to like break
Mm,
through your everyday to the point where it absolutely sends this message of importance or urgency that this
yeah,
notification is more important than the conversation you're having with your family at the dinner table.
yeah.
Like how it's even worded, and I know people refer to it as clickbait or there's all these different ways of calling it, but
Mhm.
again, it's designed to send the cue to your nervous system that you need to pay attention to this right now. It's more important than whatever is in front of you. And it's
Yeah.
designed that way, which I just find kind of concerning if we're not careful.
Yeah. And as young people, we talk about our teenagers, they don't
Yeah,
know anything different,
that's right.
right? It's just or I don't know how it is in other parts of the world or in Canada, but so many schools in America are now saying a no phone zone
Mhm.
where the phones don't even come to school or they're put away.
Yeah,
And that's starting to become very normal. And as hard as it is, because we know we need to learn to live with
mhm.
phones and we need to learn to use them in our everyday life or in our classrooms
Yeah,
because sure there are awesome tools for those things. I'm the first to say that. I love the
yeah,
technology, but the temptation, especially in the teenage years and the
yeah.
frontal cortex
That's
isn't even
right.
formed,
Mhm.
that they how can they resist? I mean,
Yeah.
someone might be talking about me. Someone
Mhm.
might have said something. There might be a comment on that, but I have to
Yeah,
see that right
yeah,
now. And they just don't have the discipline.
yeah.
And most adults don't have the
That's
discipline. So
right.
how could we expect young people to have it too?
Yeah.
So I actually think I don't want my kids to hear me say it, or maybe I will let them know that I think it's a really healthy thing so that we can cultivate the relationships and learn without that distraction at all.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely echo that. And again, when we think about the developmental stages of a teenager, this is literally like a perfect storm. Right? Like they're going through this identity transformation. The ego is very much trying to figure out what it is. It's in that place of risk taking, not wanting to miss out. Like
Yeah.
it's literally like the most dangerous season to possibly do it. And I believe it was Dr. Jonathan Haidt, who the author of The Anxious Generation. I heard him on a
Mm.
podcast once, and the interviewer asked him, they said, Dr. Jonathan, like, when is it safe to give a child a cell phone? And his response, like, floored me, Natalie. He said, when you want their childhood to end.
Oh, I thought you were just gonna say never, but this
Never,
is
yeah.
much more
I know.
emotional.
It is, absolutely. It literally is when you want your childhood to end because as soon as
Oh,
they have access to that, like,
wow.
they inevitably can see things, hear things, have access to information that
Yeah,
all of a sudden our little ones, our littles, they're not, it's not age appropriate. And again, I remember hearing that comment and just being like, "Oh my gosh," just knowing that, like,
yeah.
Jackson had an iPad so little, right, for him to play his little
Mm,
games and again, but just
yeah,
recognizing that it comes at a cost, right? Access to technology, access to information. If we don't at the same time of giving access, also share the tools and the strategies and helping them set
yeah.
up some of those guardrails. Again, we're kind of creating or pouring gasoline on a pretty big raging fire.
Yeah. Oh, it's so important that
Yeah.
we've just acknowledged that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. I could share with you also, Natalie. I again, as somebody who was, teaching child development when my kids were in developmental stages, it was always a wee bit of a treat where I'd go into the university and teach them, my university students about age appropriate development, and I'd come home and I would live it. But I do recall, if I could share with you just briefly, there was this one moment where I walked into the room, and even Hunter at the time would probably have been maybe like 6 or 8, like they were kind of school agers, and I walked into the room and I sat down, and they looked at me, Natalie, and they both were like, "Ugh." And I was like, "Wow, that's not a very nice way to say hi to mom." And they said, "Mom, we don't know where the parents are in this TV show. We don't know where they get all their money. We don't know why they're not in school." And like they started to like just like give me this laundry list of like just random updates on this TV show that they were watching. And I remember it was Zach and Cody, The Sweet Life. And I'm like, "What are you talking
I
about?" They're like,
remember
"Mom,
that one well.
that's right." They're like, "Anytime you sit down and watch me like TV with us, mom, you always ask those questions." I don't know where the parents are. I don't know where they're not in school because I just created, and I didn't even realize that I was doing it naturally, but I would always just be like, wow, that's kind of peculiar. Like, I wonder why this, or why is it always that the friend is this particular demographic or this particular race? Like, that seems kind of strange. And I would always be asking these kind of critical questions. And I never even realized the kids were like kind of getting a little tired of mom trying to put some, again, some parameters around the watching behavior. But
Remembered it.
yeah,
That's what's
yeah,
so great. We think
yeah,
that they're not hearing all of these things, but they are, and then they'll
exactly.
ask those questions to themselves or to other people. That's beautiful. What a great story.
Oh, there you go. But again, and just kind of as a wee bit of encouragement to other
Yeah,
families and supporters and guardians is that, like even though you might feel like, oh, I'm yelling into a hurricane, it's like try, right? Like doing a little bit of something I
yeah,
think is better than nothing. So even though we can't,
yeah,
turn back the clock or we can't, control what exposure they have to all of this information, I think just our behavior as supporters and grown-ups can really set the tone for
yeah,
how we use this technology or how we bring in information that's happening in the world, and again how we can talk about it in age appropriate ways, right? Because I think being able to talk
absolutely.
to our kids in ways that they can still feel safe and seen is really important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
especially in the world of technology. I
yeah,
mean, the numbers of kids with ADD,
yeah,
ADHD, it's really shocking.
yeah,
And then we look at phone usage, we're like, "Oh, the
yeah,
dopamine hit they get. Oh, yeah, okay." Like, do we really acknowledge that?
yeah.
Like, every single time they look down, they get dopamine, and then they need that dopamine everywhere. So
Absolutely. Yeah, there was an interesting study that was released in Canada, Natalie, and it was saying that average grown-ups were looking at their cell phone 262 times a day. Like
I believe
grown-ups,
it.
we were picking up and looking at our cell phone 262 times a day. So, we
Wow.
also are susceptible to that dopamine, to that instant information, that instant kind of feeling of kind of knowing what's going on. And again, ultimately, when people ask me all the time, like, Robin, why do we do this behavior? It's absolutely to try and make ourselves feel safe. Like, it's this idea
Mm,
that we just wanna feel safe. We just wanna know we're not alone. We just don't wanna be surprised by anything. Like, we're just trying to keep ourselves safe. And then the question I usually often ask is, are there other ways that you can kinda soothe that nervous system, right? Like, if we
mm,
know that the drive is to feel safe, because something that I know is I kinda sometimes feel actually safer when I turn it off, right? I actually feel safer when
yeah.
I go out in nature for a walk and just leave my phone behind. Like there's different ways, as you said, about setting those limits, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I had to unravel. As a matter of fact, I think I'm still unraveling,
Yeah,
kind of the way my brain was conditioned. Because if
yeah,
you can just picture for a moment, if you're sitting at a news desk, you see the TV anchor, and all you see is a background and a desk.
yeah,
But for me, looking the other way, it was my phone, my laptop
yeah.
underneath, usually a glass that
Mhm.
the viewer couldn't see, a teleprompter, and then about 20 monitors off to the side where I could see what all the other TV stations were doing. And then
Wow.
in addition to that, a producer talking in my
Yeah.
ear. And so I was reading a teleprompter, listening to this, and then I was waiting for updates like this. And I
Wow.
would see them and I would get probably that dopamine every time, like something new. I have
Yeah,
to tell. And so unraveling that,
yeah,
I fed off of it. I
yeah,
enjoyed it.
for sure.
I
Mm,
I think a lot of us, we like that stimulation, we like
yeah,
that excitement, but now trying to find a calmer pace of life, even
yeah,
3 years later, it's almost like the fear of missing out,
mhm,
right? Where you're
yeah,
like, "What am I missing in the world? What's
yeah,
happening? Am I okay?" And so finding the safety of, "I am okay.
yeah,
I don't need what good is that update doing in my life or other people's lives
yeah,
unless it's gonna change my life or make it better? I
yeah,
don't need that update." But we've conditioned ourselves to needing that, and for me, on a very hyper,
yeah.
level.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You're so you painted that picture so beautifully. And I think about this is that like giving ourselves that season to reacclimate, to just
Yeah,
realize that drive by urgency, that drive of just that hustle, that do like it gets rewarded, right? Which I think is really
Mhm.
tricky as it gets extremely rewarded by society because we get called successful. We get called like really
Yes.
competent, right? And again, that ties
Yeah.
into our identity. Feels really good to be the person who knows, who's well informed. Like that is part of
Mm.
how many of us kind of get that sense of value, of worth. And again, I just really appreciate that, it's like you made that decision, but it wasn't all of a sudden now everything is easy on this side and you walk around in this
Mhm.
like zen state of like ease and
Mhm.
grace. It's like no, it's also a practice of again reacclimating ourselves to the pace and the urgency. And I know I really relate to that of wanting to find things, in a calm state. And also I also still like to be busy and I like to have lots
Mhm.
of balls up in the air, but I've recognized that the recovery part is that much more important when you're somebody who likes to be busy or be kind of doing all the things. And on that note,
Yeah.
Natalie, I'm really curious, is there a particular like recovery behavior or something that you've leaned into? I know that, your spiritual practices are so important to you, time with your family, slowing things
Mhm.
down. But if there's any particular kind of practices, if somebody says, who's listening to this as like, oh gosh, that constant, buzzing, right? We're tired and wired feeling is
Mhm.
like their normal.
Yeah.
What would be a gentle first step or an idea that you might encourage us to think about to just hold space perhaps for a different way of showing up?
Sure. For me, it was just being so intentional about when I'm busy
Oh,
and when I'm giving myself that space so that my life wasn't continually stimulated by all of these things.
mhm,
So to define those times. Right now, I'm busy and I like being busy. This
mhm.
is the period and the timeline. Timers are really good in my life,
Yep.
probably because I was on a clock for so many years, but I think they work. And
Yeah.
I think I always tell my kids, it works to give yourself 30-minute timer,
Yeah.
study hard for those 30 minutes,
Great.
and then stand up. Even when you're in, you think you're in a real focus mode, stand up because you'll be surprised that if you just take a 10-minute walk, you'll come back and you'll be even more focused. So
That's right.
timers really work for me,
Mhm,
um, where I can work hard. And then when I'm off, I'm really off.
mhm.
And that is really hard for me.
Yes.
So that for this hour, I am simply putting the phone in the car
Yeah.
and I'm going to go on a walk or whatever that is. If I'm watching a show, that's probably one of the hardest for me is
Mhm.
I'm actually going to watch a show. And then
Yeah.
I find myself without even thinking about it, not even watching the show because I'm
Yes.
like watching social media. And
Yes.
so to define those times and to allow yourself to focus on something, that's probably
Yeah.
one of the routines um, that I still now am doing that really, really helps me.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that encouragement to know that again, we can still be quite disciplined and quite structured, but in a way that perhaps is a bit gentler in terms of how
Yeah.
we're using our time and our focus and our energy. And then again, having that break. And I love that. I know personally for me, one of my big ones is I have to use my hands. So if I need a break from thinking of like that kind of, again, that hustle, do, achieve, perform mindset, which we know is very much those beta brain waves, for me to get out of that, I have to use my hands. So for me, that's cleaning, it's walking the dogs, holding leashes.
Mm,
It's like having my hands busy kind of gets me out of my head and it gets me into my body, right? So
mm.
anything that's like, it like almost like it's like holding the phone is actually kind of not compatible with what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do, or if it's like cooking, anything that again involves using my hands, have found that gets me out of my head, gets me into my body, and it makes that transition from those beta brain waves of that do hustle
Mhm.
perform I'm more open to actually just slowing it down and giving myself some recovery time. So
I haven't
oh,
thought about that, and I'm going to use that in those times when I am putting things away because I think we probably all do that naturally, and I've never thought about using that strategy because I do the same thing where I'm gonna cook. well, then I
Yes,
can't pick up my phone
that's right.
unless I'm gonna get flour and eggs
Yeah,
and all over my phone,
exactly.
or I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna garden for a little bit.
Yeah.
Same thing. So I love that. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna go use my hands.
I love that. I love it, and I'm so glad. I love this. Now, Natalie, I could talk to you for days. So again, I hope we can get you back one day soon. Thank you so very much for just your openness of your lived experience, and again, just that setting that example. You shine so bright and set an example for so many
Thank
of us
you.
to see that there's again these opportunities for reinvention, reimagining, and just how lovely it looks like on the other side of sometimes making some of those harder decisions. So, Natalie, thank you, and I hope we'll have you back real soon.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Take good care. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.